So everybody has the same major here, or no? So let's hear them.
Hospitality.
Hospitality.
Psychology.
Psychology. Well, I'll be a great subject for you.
Marketing.
Marketing. Spanish. Okay.
Environmental science.
This is entirely random. How did you even know this class was available?
Read about it.
Okay.
Sociology.
Very nice. You don't count. You guys in the back, what are you doing back there?
Auditing. Auditing the class.
Oh, you're not studying to be an auditor. You're
She's not auditing us,
Yeah.
luckily.
Yeah, actually, I've had experiences with auditors.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Still not in jail.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. University of New Orleans President Peter J. Foss, who was our guest last week, recently announced that Gregg Lassen would be our Vice President for Business Affairs. He is the current Vice President for Finance, was recently the Vice President for Finance and Operations at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas, where my grandfather's from. He will succeed Linda Robinson, who was retiring as Vice President of Business Affairs after 40 years at the university. Prior to his position at Lamar, he spent 5 years at the University of Texas Tyler, where he was serving as the Vice President for Business Affairs and then Executive Vice President, I believe the first to have that title. He also spent 3 years as Vice President of Business and Finance at the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. He holds a doctorate in political science from Southern Mississippi, a law degree from the University of Houston, and a master's and bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So let's get started. How about a round of applause for our guest today?
Thank you very much.
So you've been at the University of New Orleans for how long?
2 months.
2 months. So you're looking at New Orleans with some pretty fresh eyes.
Yeah, except I'm looking at the university with fresh eyes, but I've been coming here since I was 13.
What was your first reason for your first trip?
My dad was I think I told you this, was a jazz trombonist before he had children. I'm the reason he had to give up being a jazz trombonist. But he was from the Midwest, and there were clubs around Lake Geneva. I don't know if they still have clubs in the Lake Geneva, Wisconsin area, Chicago area. But he loved New Orleans, and so when I was 13, he brought me down here just to show it to me. And I've been coming back ever since, but primarily as a tourist. My first career, I had a couple of stints where I worked in the city and lived in the Hyatt. Is there still a Hyatt next to the Superdome?
Real.
Yep, I lived in that Hyatt for about 6 months, which was great because I was single and was on expenses. So every night I worked my way into some bizarre corner of the city. So I've always seen it as a tourist, and living here is a completely different experience. And to be honest, I didn't know anything about the university until I got here 2 months ago.
Did you decide on your track to become the head of financial operations? Was that something you always wanted to do? Was that your idea when you finished with your master's? Did you know when you got your baccalaureate degree this was the direction you were going to take?
No, and I think this is important for the students in the audience to understand. It's important to have a plan in your life, but it's also really important to be flexible because you can't know all the possibilities. I didn't know there was such a job as Vice President of Business Affairs at a university when I was going to a university. I guess if I'd have taken the time to think about it, I would have recognized it was something that had to be done. It wasn't on my radar screen at all as a young person. I had no plans whatsoever, but things just work out the way they work out at some point. So you got to stay flexible.
So what would you say were the moments and times where you got to the turnpike and you made some changes, or you saw that there were other possibilities?
I think part of it was I went through school too rapidly. I'm a first-generation college student like many of you, and being of modest income, I went through my first level as quickly as I could. I wanted to monetize my degree. Professors don't always want to hear this, but some of us, especially first-generation college students, are motivated to find a job as a result of the education we get. Enough people touched me while I was through there, though, that certain classes really had an effect on my life and made me realize there were bigger and better things. So I was always drawn back to college life. So I got my other degrees, my law degree and my PhD, were done part-time, more or less in evening or a hybrid fashion, because I was a working man. But I forgot the question, actually.
Was saying what different points in time do you think that you took interesting turns in your life?
I've had, well, almost every day is an interesting turn, but I pursued a career after I got out of school in industry. But at the end of, when I found out I'd had enough of that experience, I wanted to get back into a university life because this was the thing I missed. The college experience, you have no idea what value you're getting right now. A lot of the great things that you'll have out of this experience you don't really appreciate while you're having those experiences. But in 5 or 10 or 15 years, you're going to look back and go, well, that was a really important point in my life. In fact, I have a decision tree theory of life, which is, you all know about decision trees, right? But you're usually here when you realize that was a really important decision that you made in your life. And that's happened to me numerous times in my life. Again, I thought I had a plan, but my life has taken me in a lot of interesting directions, a lot of interesting locations, meeting a lot of people I never would have guessed I would have met. Right now I'm with a famous guy. How could you have ever imagined that I'd be sitting here in this classroom with Irvin Mayfield? Doesn't make any sense. So,
when you had to make decisions about job opportunities, what would you say was the priority in a lot of your decision making?
Started out with poverty. So
making some money?
Yeah, so really, I got an undergraduate degree in business, although my love was really political science, but the business degree seemed like it was going to be easier to monetize. A professor convinced me to stay on and get my MBA, and the way that he convinced me of that was your starting salary after another year of school will be more than double what it would be if you left right now. He was trying to entice me to stay and just be a student forever and get a PhD at that time. But when I got my MBA, I went out and wanted to make money. But what happened was I got into an industry that was interesting for a while, but the people weren't that interesting. So the water cooler conversation was about how the sports teams were doing, and I know I shouldn't make fun of sports teams in this city, but how the sports teams were doing and how to get chickweed out of your lawn. Well, I want to have more meaningful conversations than that. And so I have always been drawn back to university life. That's why I went back to law school. Why I went back to get my PhD. I wanted to be drawn into interesting conversations with people that were passionate about subjects that I didn't know a lot about. And it's the perfect job for me. Even though I'm just the finance guy and I have to wear a tie, have to wear a tie and all that stuff, I get the opportunity to meet people like you, meet chemistry professors who can teach me about really the origins of life. I mean, to meet philosophers. If you haven't taken a philosophy course, you have to take a philosophy course. It changed my life. I'm a business guy, right? And I'm telling you the most important course I ever took in college was in philosophy.
Why was that the most important course you've taken?
Taught me to question authority, taught me to think about, I mean, the great irony in my life is that I am often considered to be the authority figure, and the surreptitious thing is questioning authority is the most important thing you can do.
What have you found so far, being so new to the university? What have you found some of the biggest challenges to be here at UNO from your own personal, professional outlook? But also, what do you find as some of the biggest opportunities that you see being at the university halls?
Let me start with the opportunities. This is a great university, and it has so much potential. But to some degree, it's a turnaround. So the business mentality that I bring to the job allows me to distance myself from it a little bit more than the typical faculty member would. And so I'm looking at this place as an underperforming set of assets. And given the way state government funding, the model for how universities are operated has changed abruptly. Not abruptly, it's taken 15 years for this change to take place, but it's changed dramatically. We have to operate universities differently now and still try to hold on to the same values we had in the past. So that's very difficult, and culture change is the big challenge. But the great opportunity is we're the University of New Orleans. This is a great city, an international city, and this needs to be one of the first truly international universities. So
how would you say the work that you're doing will impact the actual student who attends the university on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, the effects will not be immediate. the long-term value of your degree will be dramatically enriched by the work that we're going to be doing here in the next couple of years. The University of New Orleans is going to be much better known and much more famous in the next 3 to 5 years, and I can assure you of that.
Why a PhD? That is an unusual thing for someone finishing with an MBA to go back and then say they're going to get their terminal degree. What was the impetus behind that?
Pure and simple, I missed college life, and I really did miss the life of the mind. As a college student, you just really aren't going to be able to cherish the real value of the experience you're getting. And so, just like many of you, I was sitting here thinking I was getting a college degree so I could get a better job. And deep down, those professors were sneaky little dudes. They were affecting my life in a lot of other ways that I didn't fully appreciate until decades later. Well, somebody famous once said, youth is wasted on the young, and it's true, and you have to wait till you're an old guy like me before you can appreciate that. But I studied a PhD because I was just interested at a deeper level in how the world works. So I studied international affairs.
How did that look at the time? I mean, I'm assuming you were already probably working.
Yeah.
How did you incorporate the return to the university setting into your life?
Well, I kind of looked at it as my hobby. It turns out I'm not that great an athlete. I don't have any musical abilities. So I guess I just needed a hobby. In the life of the mind, that's why I do relate well to faculty members. I mean, you've got faculty members here that are so passionate about the things they're interested in. That's why you can make fun of them sometimes, because parts of their lives that you would expect them to have fully formed are kind of missing because they've spent most of their focus in one area of their life. Well, I didn't really have that opportunity. I mean, I've done a bunch of different things. So I have the opportunity to have a bunch of different experiences. But find somebody that interests you, whether it's your major subject or not, and go talk to him or her about what they're passionate about. It'll open your eyes to some possibilities you just can't even imagine.
What interests you to pick foreign affairs really as the continuation of your study?
Yeah, I got a specialization in international business in my undergraduate degree. And then I studied international business when I was in business school. Then when I went to law school, I studied international law. And I guess there was just nothing else for me to take. So the world is shrinking. I mean, this is a big thing for me. This might bore some of you, but the status quo today with nation states, the way they're arrayed, you've studied some history and you know nation states have changed over time. But the model over the last several hundred years has been pretty consistent. We're going to take a great leap soon. I don't want to say great leap forward because that's what the Chinese communists were saying, but the nation state model is flawed in a lot of ways. In society, we're breaking down those barriers. So I'm a visionary, so I'm interested in what comes next for society. We're going to be in a different place. Your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren are going to live in a world that's very different from the world we live in. And I'm interested in understanding what that's going to look like.
An MBA, a Juris Doctorate,
Yeah, it's
you're a
ridiculous.
lawyer, you're a businessman, and at the same time, you went to get your PhD. I mean, those are kind of, one wouldn't say any of them are adverse
Yeah.
to each other, but that's very unusual to
I'm
have.
a very unusual person.
Is it just a love of studying? Is it just a love of school? Or is there a real value proposition in going back and completing each of those different tracks, which are really different stops on the road academically?
Sure. I'm embarrassed to admit that when I was getting into each one of those, I really didn't fully appreciate how different they were. But he's exactly right. A law degree is very different than a master's of business administration. And the PhD really is a quixotic approach to thinking about life in a different way.
And it's very rare to have someone who has completed all three.
Yeah, it's kind of silly, really. I mean, I did this for myself. A PhD is actually one of the more selfish things you can do in your life because it's all about you and your mind, and it's less about what you're doing for the rest of the world. And I, unfortunately, had to do it when I had a family. Not unfortunate that I had a family, unfortunate for my family that I chose that as my hobby because it is extremely time consuming. And I remember having to, when you're working on your dissertation, you have paper everywhere. So I took over the dining room in our house, and we didn't have a family meal in that room for 2 years solid. And I remember one of my daughters looking at me and just saying, you know, Daddy, you should have done this before you had kids. So, but it turned out to be, I think I set a good example for my oldest daughter is a sophomore, no, she's a junior in college now, and she wants to be a professor. And I think maybe my background has something to do with that.
You have to follow me down the road on this
Okay.
question. If you had to say the type of person or personality, maybe person, best suited for the type of degree that we're discussing, how would you define that? What type of person should pursue the Master's in Business Administration? What type of person should pursue the Juris Doctorate to finish law school? What type of person should pursue the PhD? What type of person should pursue all 3 different distinctions?
Probably nobody should do the latter. But stereotypes aren't that helpful. I mean, I got my MBA from a very good school, the University of Wisconsin. I met people with broad backgrounds, and the best business schools now really want people not like what I was. I went straight from undergraduate business school to an MBA. The best business schools want people who had wildly diverse careers before that. So somebody with your background should go get an MBA from a great school. And then that actually adds the value in the program. Just being a business person without some passion about what you're going to be in business in kind of misses the point. Now, my first job, I got into the energy business because I was really passionate about understanding how that played a role in the rest of society. So I've been very lucky. I've been involved in 2 major interests, education and energy. They're both engines of the world's economy, of society in general. We're a civilized society, and these are 2 really important things that societies do to improve themselves. I had a job offered right out of school. I don't want to name the company because it's kind of, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but it was to be a breakfast cereal marketer. It was a better paying job than any other job offer I had. The northern Midwest has, from South Dakota, Minnesota has cereal companies, and Michigan has cereal companies. So I had an offer. But the idea that I would spend my life trying to sell sugary cereals to kids, that just didn't motivate me. I was going to make more money, but if you're worried about making money, that should set that aside. That's not what's important in life. So I discarded that, and I went to do stuff that interested me.
Okay, if you're a college student, and as much as you want to set aside making money,
Yeah, no, you can't.
and feel
You can't for a while, but here's the deal. Set a goal for yourself. This is what I did, and I got really lucky because after I got my MBA and then my law degree, I started teaching business at night. So I worked in an MBA program teaching other people. And the first thing, if any prospective MBA students there, my marketer, where's my marketer? Do you want to get an MBA? Who wants to get an MBA later? Thank you. She's the capitalist pig in there. Okay. The whole idea, you ask somebody why would you want to get an MBA?
I want to teach.
Oh, that's a good answer. Most people say to make more money. So you're dealing with people in an MBA program that want to make more money. Well, that begs the question, just like he's doing with me right now, well, why? Well, if the next question that comes, if you say, I want to make more money, I started asking all the students, well, how will you know when you have enough? And so then I had to ask myself that question. And this is the part that will free you up. If you get nothing else from me, this is the thing that you should remember. Think about that. If at first you're a poor college student and then you go get a job and you're worried about making money, have a target. Don't just always think more is the answer. I figured out how much I needed to live a life that I wanted to live. And when I hit that target, I quit my job. And then I pursued other things to do, and not chasing money gives you a sense of freedom, and it doesn't matter what number you pick. So the number you're all going to say is, I need $1 million, because that's easy. Everybody says that. It turns out it's not enough. but whatever the number is, you can create for yourself. This is the beautiful part. You can create for yourself a sense of freedom. Target $500,000. When you make your first $500,000, you're going to stop doing whatever that is if the only reason you're doing that is to make money and do something you want to do. Guess what happens? You have this sense of freedom that most people never have during their lives. I have had such a blessed life because I stopped worrying about making money. And I still make money. I mean, I have a decent job now, but I'm doing something I want to do, and so it's a lot more fun. So I've just been very lucky. I've had a very bizarre, interesting life. I've lived all over the world, and I haven't been chasing dollars.
Describe freedom.
Decide what?
Describe freedom.
Freedom.
I'm have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion around freedom because you've mentioned that a lot.
Yeah.
What is freedom? That's not something you hear mentioned in classes often or in the profession of business.
Right.
And education. Freedom is not something that we discuss a lot.
Right, because we like rules. Rules are important for other people, right? The ability to live life on your own terms is how I would describe freedom. I wear a coat and tie because I choose to as a symbol of respect for the job that I've been allowed to have. But I don't normally wear a coat and tie. I'm a Jimmy Buffett fan, sorry. And I'm really a beach bum most of the time, or a mountain man the other part of the time. And then I have a job that I do, and the job requires a uniform, so that's fine. And I'm happy when I'm putting it on, and I'm happy when I take it off. But I put it on when I choose to. It's having choice.
And how is the university a path towards freedom, in your perspective?
Well, now, I choose to do this because this is my opportunity to give back. It sounds too grandiose maybe, and I'm not a hero or anything like that, but I work in a university so that I can provide for you guys the same opportunities that I got by having the privilege of going to the University of Wisconsin. It changed my life. My grandfather was a chauffeur, and my grandmother was a maid. They were fresh off the boat from Eastern Europe. If you look back in most countries, I would not have had the opportunity to get anything beyond a high school education, and I would have been a factory worker in Milwaukee. And not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but Friday afternoons would be going to the house on the corner that had the Ham's beer sign, and that should have been my life. I should be really good at bowling. That's the life that was kind of laid out there for me. But because I had access to higher education, it provided me a lot more choice. And then if you give yourself that opportunity to grab choice, then you have some responsibility to do something about it. So I've created a life for myself that nobody could have predicted, even me.
What would you say, looking back on your experience, especially in the academy where you talk about it really lovingly, what would you say would be a few things that if you had to do it all over again, you would change? What are some of the things you think you missed?
Wow. I wouldn't do it over again. I have lived life to its fullest pretty much every day. And being open to the possibilities of what might happen. I've lived in Hong Kong, I've lived in Trinidad, I've spent a lot of time in Europe, traveled whenever and wherever I wanted to. Took my kids to the Galapagos Islands a couple of years ago. You got to do that. That's really cool. And I'm still open to the possibilities. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can still happen. I'm 53 years old, but that doesn't mean I'm dead. So
no regrets.
Not a one. Yeah, I mean, the thing is if you're into science fiction at all, science fiction is really cool because it talks about all these possibilities. I can look back at those decision trees, and had I done this thing instead of that thing at any moment in time, I'm thoughtful enough that I can imagine what my life would have been like if I'd have followed that down. And it might have been equally interesting or equally fun. It's just different, and there's some possibility that actually happened in some parallel universe, so I'm probably having fun there too.
All right, before we open it up to our students to ask you what they will, we do a word association and a Proust questionnaire. And the way it works is I say a word, you say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay. If I swear, you have to just let that go.
I ask you a question, you say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
All right, you good? You ready?
Sure.
All right. Law school,
Fun.
business school,
Grueling.
PhD programs,
Interesting.
science,
Hard.
math,
Okay.
music,
Love it.
art.
Love it.
What is your favorite word?
Possibility.
What is your least favorite word?
No.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
My family.
What turns you off?
I shouldn't say this, but rules.
What is your favorite curse word?
Oh, yeah. You know, cursing. A lot of people will tell you, this is, I'm sorry, I got to give you a dissertation about that one. A lot of people will tell you, my parents, among them, when they were alive, that cursing was a sign of a poor intellect, that you weren't smart enough to think up other things and say, well, I have an incredibly large vocabulary. But cursing done well is an art form, and there's room for it. But you have to insert the curse words into a complex sentence. And I won't give you an example right now.
Okay. What is your favorite curse word?
Yeah, it will offend people. But I make them up. I mean, you can combine them in all kinds of interesting ways. Usually, no, I'm not going there, sorry.
Okay. I'm just saying. Dr. Foss?
Yeah, it
told us his
doesn't
favorite
involve
curse-
Dr. Foss.
He told us his curse word last week.
He did, what's his? I know his. No, I bet I don't know his.
What did he say his was? Yes.
Yeah, I would have guessed, yeah. He's a beautiful man, too. He really is. I mean, you are so lucky to have him as a president because he's from here. He gets this city at a level of depth that most people couldn't, and he bleeds this place. I mean, you couldn't have a more dedicated servant working for you than that man. Yeah, he really is a beautiful man.
All right, I'm going to let you go with that question.
You were going to keep trying?
Yeah, I
I
was
was
gonna
going
keep
to get
trying.
frustrated, and then I was going to actually blurt it out. But it's,
What sound or noise do you love?
steel drum.
What's,
I have a steel drum at my home, and I have never learned how to play the goddamn thing. And if there's one thing I was disappointed about, my father was a talented musician. I don't know how talented he was. He'd lost his lip before I was old enough to know what that meant. But he loved music, and he instilled in me some love of music, but I like beach music, island music. I lived in Trinidad for a while, so I brought home a steel drum. I have no talent whatsoever. I mean, I might not have any talents with regard to anything, but one thing I really am not talented at is music. But my kids are talented at music, so do you think it might be generational skipping, or?
I would have to imagine for a man with a law degree, an MBA, and a PhD that you probably just didn't spend enough time practicing.
Oh, you have to practice.
That old practice thing.
Yeah,
eludes
I'm
you.
not sure I've ever practiced anything.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Chainsaws.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
All of them. I think I could have been a doctor, except I don't like blood or sick people. So I didn't do that. I was going to go take the MCAT just to see how that worked, but my wife got mad, so I didn't do it.
Let's see, MBA, JD,
It would have been fun.
PhD, and MD. That would have been.
It would have been something to do. It's not too late either. They have medical schools here, right?
What profession would you like not to do?
Professional athlete.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome.
All right, let's open up for some questions for our guest today. Who's going to be first?
So you said that the biggest challenge for UNO is its underperformance because of the low government funding here. Obviously, government funding probably won't be increasing anytime soon. So what is your plans to make it so it's not underperforming anymore with the funding you have available?
Well, it's a great question, and that's why I'm here to do a turnaround. We don't have enough time for me to get into the full discussion, but what's happened in America's higher education right now is a very fundamental shift from the definition of higher education as a public good, which means the benefit to having our citizens educated is that accrues to society as a whole, therefore society should pay for it. And we've shifted the funding model so that now education is more and more a private good, which means the benefit accrues to the individual. That's fine that we've done that shift, but there's all these unintended consequences that accrue from that, which means we've shifted from a supply-oriented model, a government-oriented model, where you were a product, or I was a product of a system, to a model that is really market-oriented, a demand model, where you're customers of a system. And public education has been woefully underprepared to deal with that shift. And my challenge is to get the culture to change for people who work in higher education to adapt to this new model. They're very afraid of change. People seek out lives in higher education in many ways because they're change resistant. Think about how change resistant, this is actually the joy of my job. I work in arguably the most, my job is to change the most change resistant institutions in Western civilization. Twice a year we still wear medieval clothing. We carry around a mace, which is a stick that you hit people with in medieval times, and that's our ceremonial stuff. So by design, a university is the most change-resistant institution in the world, and now they have to change. So I embrace the challenge of trying to help these people find their way to change it. Because it's really important that we do this in a way that doesn't break it, but then allows us still to hold on to the values of the public value of education. Because in my PhD studies, you'll be glad that you want to hear about my PhD study. This almost answers your question, but not quite. But I'm not that worried about that, to be honest. I applied business models to nation states. Remember, I was telling you I'm not sure what happens next. So I wanted to know what made some countries more powerful than others. And I did a little ranking thing, and I figured out, you'll be happy to know the United States is still the most powerful country in the world, so you're safe. But you start digging for the answer why, and it turns out, my belief, it's not we have more guns than anybody, it's not even that we have more money than anybody, it's that we have educated our populace more broadly and more deeply than any other place in history. And that's the value. So if that's what I take home and that's what I really understand and believe, then I work in higher education, even though the funding model has changed, to try to hold on to capture that value that we have of allowing people like you all to get access to a higher education, because it'll be better, it's both a public good and private good. It'll be better for you individually, but it's also better for our country for you to have this opportunity. So the change model is really big. So I have to drive us to a model where we actually associate revenues with expenses, and we are more market driven. We'll have to try to grow revenues more than shrink expenses. But that means I'm so thrilled to meet you, because we need to bring people from across the country and across the world to come to school here, because we don't have enough young people in the greater New Orleans area to serve, to be the population of the university.
Next question.
You kind of got me all excited, please.
What do you think is the fastest growing business in our area?
Well, I know a little bit about this. Unfortunately, when I came here to work, it was the energy industry, and that seems to be going away. But I just read something that we are actually starting to draw the next generation of entrepreneurially oriented people. So I spent a lot of time in Austin. I was in Texas before this. Austin is a great city, really fascinating city. And I actually know a gentleman who was a state representative there who was very involved in turning Austin into a high-tech place. High-tech is almost an outmoded term now. New Orleans, with its quality of life and its true internationalness as a city, can be the next great future city. So it was a great city. It fell on hard times, partly due to the storm, but partly due to the structure of the economy. It can't be called a phoenix, because there is a phoenix in Arizona, but the mythical phoenix that rises up from its ashes, I'm here because I want to play a role in watching New Orleans do that. And you want to graduate here and then stay here, because this will be a vibrant, exciting place to live. And so the things that he does to make it an interesting place to live, so the food and the history, I love the history of the place, and the music and the culture, all presents a canvas on which the next generation of citizens can paint high-tech, interesting lives here. There's no reason why this can't be the next. What we don't even know. You know, the funny thing about where you are in life now, things are moving so fast that our disciplines are outmoded. So business school or engineering or whatever the discipline is, doesn't mean anything anymore. The jobs you're going to have during your careers aren't even invented yet. You're going to have to create the jobs. So old people like me telling you you should be an accountant or you should be a civil engineer, those are outmoded terms. You're going to have to figure out what you're going to be because it isn't there yet. Well, that can happen anywhere. Well, so why doesn't it happen here instead of Palo Alto or Austin? So let's have it happen here. I know you want it to happen here.
Absolutely.
So this is my new hometown, so let's make it happen here.
Next question.
How old were you the first time you left for the U.S., either for a vacation or for just studying?
Canada doesn't count because not really leaving.
Yeah,
You can't count Canada.
count Canada.
So I think I was an adult. I was probably in my early 20s because we couldn't afford as a family. We traveled a lot inside the United States, but it was by car in the back seat of an Oldsmobile. You know, you can't go to other countries in the back seat of an Oldsmobile. But yeah, I think I was in my 20s. No, I really don't. I think it was the Caribbean though, because somewhere I got Caribbean soul in me. So.
Okay. Next question.
How did you end up in Hong Kong and Trinidad, and what do you think about those places?
This is the weird part. So people have a harsh reaction to the energy industry because of what happened in the Gulf a couple of years ago. But the energy industry really helped change my life. So when I got my MBA, I went to work for Amoco Corporation in Chicago. And they moved me all around. So I got to go work in Hong Kong and work in Trinidad. And I loved those places. And you've just got to go. I don't care where you go. You got to go somewhere else. It doesn't even matter where. Because you just have to plunge yourself down into a setting that is completely different to you. And people live their life. You know, I'll tell you, you don't even have to leave. You just have to associate yourself with people that aren't like you enough to realize that what you think is a normal life isn't normal for most people. I grew up in a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I thought everybody was a suburban person that only went to the city when they had to go to the museum or something like that. I didn't really know. I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know even. So you just got to go explore for a while. I would encourage any and all of you to take a little bit of time between wherever you can find it and go plunge yourself down in a place that makes you extremely uncomfortable. Hong Kong will make you extremely uncomfortable. And just wander. I wandered the streets. And, you know, they live their life so differently. Even today, it's a very modern city, but you walk down the street and there's the street where they sell fish. People don't have large homes, so they don't have big kitchens like we have. So they buy their food fresh every day. So there has to be fresh food brought in every day. So there's the street with all the vegetables. Here's the street full of snakes. And you know, you go order your snake, and they grab a snake out of the little Rubbermaid pit and take a rusty pair of scissors and cut the head off the snake, and then they slit the guts and give you the gallbladder because you drink the bile right then. That's somehow a good thing. And then you've got snake for dinner. Woo, that's fun. That's not normal. I mean, but it's normal for a lot more people than you'd believe. So that stuff's that you just got to go have those experiences. I made a friend when I was in China. I was based in Hong Kong, but I was wandering around China. This is a long time ago. I was probably not much older than you. And I just was in a big city in Guangzhou. And on a Saturday morning, I didn't have to work. So I just put on my tennis shoes and just walked out of the city. I probably walked 15 miles in one direction. And I came across, you know, so the big cities in China are big modern cities. But the electricity and plumbing doesn't extend too far out into the countryside. So it's very modest Quonset hut type buildings or clay huts. And I met a guy who was riding his bike, and a lot of people were staring at me because I'm a guaylo, right? Which means foreign devil, actually. But one guy, they're all riding bikes, he just rode by me and just, he circled around me. I thought, oh, this is going to be weird. And but he stopped, and we actually had a conversation, a halting conversation, because I know about 3 words of Mandarin, and he knew pretty good English. We ended up going to a bar, and I got to tell you the story. I'm sorry. The bar didn't have electricity or plumbing. It had chairs not as nice as this. You know, the little kindergarten school chairs, little plastic chairs. So it's a cement block building with, like, I don't know, kind of ratty roof material. No electricity, dirt floor, a couple of tables like this in there, and he goes in and he gets a bottle of Qingdao beer, a big bottle of that, warm, and a bottle of orange soda, also warm, 2 little glasses that are all like cut and dirty, and he sets them down and he pours half orange soda and half beer in each one and starts teaching me Chinese words for cheers. Well, you get drunk on warm beer and orange soda, it turns out, pretty fast. And so I just had this incredible conversation with this guy. Well, we became pen pals. And then Tiananmen Square happened. You got to Google that and read about that. It was bad, and I never heard from him again after that. But I was just open to some interesting possibilities. I learned more from that guy in a day than I would have learned in a classroom for a semester about China. It's fascinating.
And what about Trinidad?
Trinidad, I fell in love in Trinidad. I can't believe I'm telling you that. Okay, I was single, so it was okay. If my wife ever watches this. Trinidad is a beautiful island nation, and its people are beautiful people, and it's somehow managed to avoid being a tourist trap. So there's just regular people living there. And part of the island has been engaged in oil production. So that's a little, I don't want to say tainted, but it's been impacted by that experience. But there's plenty of parts of the island that there's just regular people living a life like you have never experienced, and it's a tropical paradise. If you can feed yourself by walking through the jungle, and you can eat the food, and then throw the remainder on the ground, it's going to grow you more food. It's an incredible place. I used to eat shark sandwiches on the beach there. They got a thing they call shark and bake. They make this very heavy, doughy bread right there on the beach, and then they catch a shark, and they kill a shark, and they cook it over an open fire, and with the red pepper sauce, one of the best meals you'll ever have. Plus, the view is incredible.
When you say they catch a shark,
Yeah, you don't really want to swim in that same bay.
So there's enough sharks rolling around.
Yeah, there's a lot of sharks in the world. There's actually, that's probably really deep. There's a lot of sharks in the world.
Nice. So you had the shark sandwich and you liked it?
Oh, yeah. You should try anything, too. I mean, they're really, don't go get on a plane and go to Europe and then decide you need a Big Mac. Whatever country you land in, eat whatever they eat, drink whatever they drink, do whatever they do. That's great. I took my kids to Rome a couple of years ago, and we rented an apartment for 2 weeks instead of living in a hotel because I wanted them to have the real experience. So we were down the street from Vatican City on a bus route, and it was just fantastic. The landlady, her family owned an Italian restaurant. Go figure.
In Rome?
Yeah,
Wow.
but it wasn't a tourist place. It was like a locals restaurant. So we ate there pretty much every night because it was real. It was a great experience.
Next question.
Sorry, I'm not actually answering your questions on my. Yeah.
Whenever you were living here at the Hyatt, what was the wildest thing that happened?
I knew that was coming.
Oh, hell, I'm not going to tell you that. I will tell you I got kicked out of the Hyatt because the Republican convention was coming to town, and they booked up the entire city. And at one point, they just made me move out. I'm like, I've been in this room for like 2 months. And they're like, yeah, not anymore.
So I had to guess you're not a registered Republican.
Because of my job in state government, I am
can't.
an entirely neutral person. But I wanted to hang around and see what that was going to be like, but there were no rooms for non-membered people. But I can't really answer the question about. You know what? The sad thing is tourists come here and they think Bourbon Street is where the interesting things happen, and that is the least interesting place in the city. This is a cool city. I mean, you know, I love the Garden District, and I love wandering around. When I first started coming here, the Warehouse District was actually just a place full of warehouses, and you really didn't want to go down there. And so this, you know, for a lot of people want to fault this city in a lot of ways, but it really has been progressively improving over time despite all of the travails that it's faced. This place has heart, like a lot of places I've never been. And I mean, so there's only about 5 cities in the United States that are actually very interesting at all, and this is one of them. You guys are really lucky to live here.
Next question.
You gave up on me? You got a question. You're just looking at me like I'm from a different planet.
What would you say to an international student? Why should they come to UNO and get an education rather than any other state?
Because it is truly an international city, so we're more receptive. If you're an international student and you go to the University of Nebraska, people are going to look at you the way those Chinese kids looked at me when I was wondering, they're like, you're just untouchable or unworthy. You can integrate into society here rapidly and find a place to be comfortable pretty much anywhere in the city. It's fantastic. Again, you know, the United States goes through these periodic cycles of expansionism and then isolationism. But when we are, so lots of times we don't even want to think about the rest of the world. And then when we do think about the rest of the world, many times it's to make it more like us. Well, this is a city that's not like that. This city adopts the characteristics of the people that live in it. That's a real talent. I never really thought about it that way. That's a good question, and I gave a pretty good answer, I think.
Next question.
I have a question. And there's a growing, I guess, trend in the law school / MBA program together.
Yeah.
Do you recommend people taking both of those together at the same time, or would you think that if somebody was interested in doing that, they should take it separately?
It's a great question, and I've thought about that. For my own experience, they were, just as we were talking about it, 2 very different experiences, really 2 different mindsets. So if you can afford, you know, the value is, of course, you get it done faster and you can afford it more easily. So if your only concern is you want to get a job out of the back of that, then doing it together is fine. And if you want to study corporate law or something like that, I guess that's fine. But I studied law not because I wanted to be a lawyer. In fact, I'd encourage you to go to law school. I wouldn't encourage you to be a lawyer. I mean, those are 2 different things. Law school, we're supposed to, in your undergraduate experience, we're supposed to teach you how to be a critical thinker. But a lot of people get through undergraduate college without learning that skill. But law school is where you really learn how to be a critical thinker. That's what I got out of it. I didn't really have any intention of being a lawyer. Now I did it for 2 years in Washington, D.C. I kind of got lost, I guess. So go to law school with an open mind to really understand the law. And if you really want to understand the law, you have to read Antigone by Sophocles, which he was a Greek author back in the time of Socrates. He's actually pre-Socratic. And that's all you need to know about the law, that one play, Antigone. And so I had that kind of mindset about it. But if you just want to do it to get a job, combining them is probably fine because then it's more like the MBA. But an MBA in most schools is not very philosophical. It's tools and techniques to analyze things. All valuable skills. I mean, I use them every day in my life. But if you can, separate them and enjoy them differently. Very different courses in the meal of life.
Let's get down to last questions. I do have one, by the way.
Oh.
You said New Orleans was one of 5. What are the other 4?
I put Boston on that list. I put San Francisco on that list. I put New York, of course, and Washington, D.C. And then I kind of want to make there's a couple on the cusp. And Miami would be one. The neat thing about Miami is how close it is to the United States. It's the capital of Latin America. It's very much, not even like the rest of Florida. And if you haven't been to Miami, you owe it to yourself to go to Miami. It's a cool town.
Boston, which I can recognize and agree with you, perhaps because of the amount of educational institutions there.
But history. You can walk from Concord I mean, you can walk on the Revolutionary battlefields. I mean, it's where and you can go to John Adams' house. I mean, there's just, the place is just caked with history. Now, if you've grown up here, you're not as impressed by that. I grew up in the Midwest, there is no history. I mean, people just, South Dakota, right? They moved there in 1950.
And that was about as much as we had within, 8-hour drive in
Right.
each direction.
Yeah, I don't think people really lived in Milwaukee till 1955 when Laverne and Shirley moved. So there's just not that much going on. So Boston is rich with history, and it's culturally very different than a lot of the rest of the United States. I mean, it's New England. It really still has a bit of that English feel. So yeah, if you can't afford to travel internationally, at least just travel around the country, because the distinctions between regions of the country used to be much greater than they are now. And the fault is chains, stores, and restaurants have ruined the regional differences that used to exist. That's one of the great things about New Orleans is chain restaurants fail here because there's good, real restaurants run by real people. I cherish that about this place. But, the suburbs of Atlanta and the suburbs of Chicago are nearly indistinguishable now. You actually have to, check your phone to find out where you are. I traveled a lot. I mean, lots of American cities, you look out the window, you can't really be sure where you are. That's sad. Boston's not like that.
San Francisco I recognize, but San Francisco without Los Angeles on the list?
Yeah, Los Angeles, it's fine. I mean, look at you. It's a very big place for film and music and all of that, but it's also
historically. There's a lot of history in Los Angeles too.
Yeah, it's not as interesting as San Francisco. You made me only pick 5.
Well, you said 5.
Well, yeah, I picked 5. Well, I mean, I actually worked in downtown Los Angeles for a while. And downtown Los Angeles is kind of funny. You'd expect it to be this really dynamic, amazing city. Oh, the streets roll up at 5 o'clock. Everybody leaves and goes. The closest place to go is Santa Monica, and Santa Monica is kind of fun. But there is no there. I mean, that's what somebody said that about Oakland, but it's kind of true. Los Angeles is just so spread out. And you go to Orange County, you go somewhere else when you're in Los Angeles. You don't stay in Los Angeles.
But you don't feel the same way about Oakland and somewhat of San Francisco?
Well, I just stay. There is a downtown San Francisco that is vibrant at all hours of the day, and that's the distinction between that and Los Angeles, I would say. There's one, you go across the Bay Bridge and you go to other places, but you actually have left San Francisco and you're doing something else then. When you leave Los Angeles, you're still in Los Angeles for the next 2 hours in any direction.
And I know you're only doing 5, but
yeah,
just curious, no other southern cities.
Yeah, no. I mean, Texas. I lived in Texas, and my wife's a native Texan. Houston and Dallas. Actually, Dallas is very boring. I mean, there's not much to Dallas at all, really.
I agree with you on that.
But Houston's kind of.
Sorry, Stephanie.
Yeah, but the third coast. There's a lot coming. There's a lot starting to be written now about the third coast. So you've got, of course, the East Coast and the West Coast, and now, it turns out I've lived the bulk of my adult life, other than my wild travels, in Houston and New Orleans, and I kind of claim, I own a home in Sarasota, Florida. The Gulf Coast of the United States is a fascinating place, and we actually have more in common with each other than we do with the northern parts of the rest of our states. I mean, New Orleans and Monroe don't have a lot in common, but New Orleans and Mobile have a lot in common. So it's kind of interesting.
Last question. Who is it going to go to?
Sorry, I keep asking questions.
That's good,
okay.
and I would like to see more even distribution of questions.
Well, one of your jobs, would you say that is to bring more money to the university? And one of the reasons you say that is because we have to attract students from other countries or other states, right? That would be like one of the...
Sure.
Okay, so...
Are you asking, would that be one of the reasons that we would want to bring more money to the university? Is that your
No,
question?
that's how we're going to bring money to the
One
university.
of the solutions to
Yeah.
bring more resources.
So what do you think would be like the future strategies to attract people to this university? Like,
No, absolutely. It's a great question and stuff I'm working on every day. The first thing we have to do is if we're, okay, so let me back up just a little bit. This university was established really to serve a regional population which has been decimated. So we can't survive if we just serve that regional population. the whole state of Louisiana only has 4 million people, and we've got a bunch of our own affiliates that we're in competition with for those. So we have to reach farther afield. So I can quadruple our target market from the state of Louisiana just by adding Chicago, Houston, Dallas, and Atlanta, and actually I've quintupled our marketplace because those all have more than 4 million people each. But if we're going to get those people, or if we're going to get somebody from international places, when they come to New Orleans, they're expecting New Orleans. The University of New Orleans doesn't feel enough like New Orleans to me. So we're going to have to do some things, we're going to have to invest some money on the campus to make it feel more like a part of the city. And what's neat is we have some really neat faculty members who share that concern with me, and they have some great ideas. And wouldn't it be neat to have a rail line that went from here down Elysian Fields to the French Quarter? You know, Carrollton has one now. I mean, we're all and actually what I'd like to see, and this is actually John Rennie's idea out of the transportation department, but let's not have a fake touristy one. St. Charles exists and it's real. It's not Epcot version of a rail car. Let's have a modern light rail system from here into the city. That would be pretty cool. So New Orleans, so I just need to New Orleans it up a little bit, I think. And you know what? This is an urban campus, and yet it's really beautiful. I need to make the lakeshore more of a play area. That's our backyard. You ought to be out. Yeah, it's 4 o'clock. You ought to be playing frisbee out there right now, or whatever you do nowadays. I still think frisbees are cool. I don't know. But, you know.
Good final question. Let's thank our guest, Dr. Lassen, today.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
And I'll see y'all next week, same time, same place.
You didn't sign attendance.
This is great.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Awesome. Have to put you on every semester.